When I was a boy, my father was the night watchman at a manufacturing plant located in a rural area between Big Rapids and Chippewa Lake, Michigan. Our house, which if I remember right was a perk of the night watchman job, was across the street from the factory. The plant building was right next to a large wilderness area of state land. At that time it was simply known as the Haymarsh, but now it is officially called the Haymarsh State Game Area. We didn't understand it at the time, but Dad was always very skittish about letting us play outside after dark. He would sometimes talk about hearing coyotes or bears roaming around in the Haymarsh when he was walking the perimeter of the building at night. One night in the summer of 1961, Dad walked back to the house to sit on the porch and have a cup of coffee and a sweet roll. He had a good view of the entire plant property. He saw some movement near a chain-link fence behind the building. This was approximately 3 a.m., so he felt quite sure this person wasn't there by accident. He drew his gun and watched for a few minutes. That's when he noticed this was not a person at all, but something much taller. He said it appeared to be covered in brown, gray hair. It had very broad shoulders and a powerful chest. It alternated between walking on 4 legs and then standing up on 2. He said it seemed to be looking for something along the driveway. He said later he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. He quietly moved into the house and grabbed his Kodak Signet 35mm camera, which was his pride and joy. At this point, I should mention that Dad was quite a photography buff. His father had owned one of the first camera stores in Ohio, and Dad got the shutter bug from Grandpa. As he stepped back onto the front porch, the creature moved slowly along the driveway, directly under the lights. He adjusted the camera shutter for a long exposure, held it as still as he could. He said he was shaking pretty badly by then, and snapped a picture. Dad said a few seconds later, the thing dropped back down onto all 4s and slowly moved off into the woods. He sent a print to the local newspaper and sent copies to several magazines. One that I think was called Mysterion published a photo in their spring issue of 1962. Dad had a copy of the magazine for years, but it was misplaced after he passed away. I still have the negative strip that contains this image if you'd like to have someone examine it. I also still have Dad's Kodak Signet. I haven't shot any pictures with it for several years, but I'm pretty sure it still works.
Spit my life, wonder what to do. 4 years of college and I haven't got a clue. I want the money, but I don't want the job. What I really want to be is a rock and roll star. You may say I won't get very far,
I recently recalled an experience from my childhood that had been repressed in my mind since I was about 4 or 5 years old. As a child, I grew up on a 20-acre lot just on the outskirts of Cadillac, Michigan. At that time, there was more tree coverage and fewer industrial sites in the area. We were mostly surrounded by woods. One early summer morning, I had gotten up before dawn to watch my dad get ready to go off to work. Some mornings he'd get up at 3:30 to 4 a.m. to start his days. Me and my mom would get up and send him on his way. Daily routine back then. He'd always put on his work pants and work shirts over his regular clothes and proceed to go out to his truck and load his equipment for the day. His work clothes were the dark and mossy looking material, really coarse feeling. In the darkness, he looked really shaggy looking. The morning of my encounter, I had gotten up a little earlier than usual and was very groggy. I stumbled to the large plate glass window and saw something rummaging in the truck's bed over the side of the truck. I assumed it was just Dad, so I banged on the window to get his attention and wave. I was chilled to the bone by what peered back at me. A creature that stood on 2 feet, but for the life of me had the head of a dog, canine-like, but yet somehow human. We locked eyes for what seemed to be an eternity. Strangely enough, though the eyes were not yellow as everyone else seems to see, they were a pale yellowish green in color. I finally mustered a scream and fell backwards off the couch in front of the window. As I was falling backwards, the creature had already hit all fours and was lunging for the window. He started at a good 20 feet away at the truck's back end. My scream had gotten my dad out of the bathroom and into the living room, yelling to my mom to hush me up. He looked out the window and asked me what I saw, but I was just sobbing. He went to the front door and turned on the porch light and found nothing. Annoyed that his morning was off to a not-so-quiet start, he made my mother take me back to bed and he left for the day. I was so traumatized by this experience, I repressed it for all these years. It took looking up the Dogman and studying cryptozoology to kick the memory loose again. The house where this took place still stands, with the tree coverage that was abundant as a child is history. Whatever that thing is, I'm sure he's still out there waiting.
You'll be glad this winter you bought a Coleman heater this fall. Yes, as you sit back in your easy chair, snug and comfortable, you'll be glad you bought a Coleman heater. You'll enjoy floor-to-ceiling warmth in those rooms you could never heat before.
Get your Coleman oil or gas heater now during Coleman's big bonus sale. Here's what you get.
First bonus, a new low price.
Yes, now you can get a dependable Coleman automatic heater at a new low price.
Second bonus, a new low operating cost.
Coleman saves you up to 25% on heating bills because Coleman gives you maximum heat from your fuel.
Third bonus, a 32-piece set of Libby's Safe Edge glassware worth $14. It's free with your new Coleman heater.
Get 3 big bonuses. Get your Coleman oil or gas heater now during Coleman's big bonus sale. This sale is for a limited time only.
So see your Coleman dealer tomorrow. You'll find his name and address in your telephone directory.
A few years ago, around midnight, I was on my way home. On I-75, a couple 100 yards south of the Bay Road overpass in Mackinac County, Michigan, I noticed something move near the highway reflectors. Thinking it was a deer, I turned on the bright lights and watched for it to cross the road. As I approached it, I noticed that what I thought was the reflectors on the highway was orange, and then it blinked on and off like an eye. Thinking, what the heck is that? I sped up to get closer. As I got closer, I could see the silhouette of an animal. It was sitting like a dog. Its head was even with the reflectors. It stood on all fours and turned and walked in the ditch, then up a little incline, then turned and looked at my truck. It looked back at the highway, walked on all fours to the shoulder of the blacktop, looked at the truck again with those large orange eyes. The eyes were huge. It then jumped to within a foot or two of the center line, and then the next jump landed in the grass on the shoulder of the road. I was probably like 100 feet from it. This animal was rippling in muscles and looked like it weighed about 500 pounds, if not more. Its hair, which covered its body, looked short, and its head was huge with hardly any neck. After I passed where it crossed, I hit the brakes, as there were no cars on the highway, and started to back up. As I got close to the spot where it crossed, I suddenly felt fear and thought, what the hell am I doing? I put the truck back in drive and began to leave. As I was rolling the window up, I glanced back and noticed a light, bright like a floodlight, ascending into the sky at a high rate of speed. It was at an angle of about 1 o'clock, and in just a few seconds was out of sight. Something else that was strange. There were not any light rays trailing it. I will never forget the horrible creature I saw that night. I'm sure that it was not of this world. And I'm also sure that it was pure evil. One oddly silent night, I was hanging out with a group of my friends in northwest Michigan. We usually hang out every weekend and do things that get the adrenaline pumping, everything from launching fireworks at personal property to invading so-called haunted graveyards at midnight with only the light of the full moon. My friends and I are an odd bunch of kids, or so I've been told, who've been best friends since back in the good old days of elementary school. That night bonded us through fear and horror of what all but one of us experienced. We live in the small county of Gulfstream, which is flat farmland with some swamp-like areas. We were cruising along the road when we pulled into the parking lot of a church undergoing construction. There were traffic cones signaling the areas undergoing work that we decided to take just for the hell of it. My friend Alex took 5 in his car and I took 5 in mine. Our plan was to go just outside the county where it was desolate and mess with traffic with the cones we had acquired. On the drive there, we noticed that all the cows in one pen were huddled in the corner as if hiding from something, but we thought nothing of it. Upon reaching our destination, we heard a far-off howl, but because we were the adventurous types, we shrugged it off, thinking it was just a common timber wolf. How wrong we were. The fog was very thick at this time of night, around midnight I would say, and drivers would only be able to see a few feet in front of them and would not be able to avoid any cones out in the road. What a terribly clever idea, I thought to myself as I sat a few in the road about 15 yards from each other. After the very second that I had set the last cone down, we heard the howling again, but this time it received our full attention. This was mainly because it seemed a lot closer this time. My friend Cody kept insisting that we should leave and that it would be in our best interest not to have to deal with whatever was howling. But our attention was drawn away from the howling as we heard a car approach the area of road with the traffic cones. After a few seconds of listening, we heard the car come to a screeching halt as it hit a cone. Knowing that we were in big trouble, we ran farther into this swampy section of land. We heard footsteps on the round and the rough sound of an older gentleman saying, "Goddamn kids!" That's when it got bad. We knew the old man had left, but we could continue to hear footsteps. These were much heavier and behind us. Cody said to make a run for it, but I must have confused run to the car with find a new hiding spot, as all of my friends except for a boy named Mike took a right. I took a left. I came out to the edge of a murky pond where I could hear something large splashing the water out just beyond the visibility levels of the fog. At this point, I had no doubt that I was dealing with the Dogman of Michigan, and I was trembling as though I was in an earthquake. Mike and I had curiosity get the best of us, and we leaned forward a bit to have a look. The dim outline of an extremely large man came into view, but this was no man. The yellow eyes were staring me down as I examined the rest of it. I heard a small yelp, and Mike made a run for it. I stood still, frozen with fear. The beast was extremely hairy, with a snout and fangs large enough to bite clean through any man my size. I was fairly skinny and just over 6 feet tall. The one thing that really hooked me was that it was a bipedal animal standing on 2 feet. The beast's yellow eyes continued to stare me down, and I noticed that it began to move in my direction. I then heard yells of my name. "Ryan!" I heard, "Ryan, hurry to the car!" I was relieved that my friends had not left without me, but more alarmed at the beast slowly making its way towards me. I ran like an Olympic sprinter towards the sound of the voices, and I could hear the large splash of the beast exiting the water in my direction. I reached my car, and everyone was relieved to see me in one piece. We jumped into the car, and I gunned it down the road. And just as we got moving, the 7-foot monster got to the side of the road and clawed my car. Then it let out the most blood-curdling howl I can never forget. The worst part was that I heard a return howl in the direction I was heading. Alex's car was in front of me, and I saw it stop and drift around into the opposite direction of me, and I did the same when I saw a similar beast ahead of me. As we drove past the spot where the first one clawed my car, I saw the beast standing, just watching as we passed by. It's been 4 years since we encountered this thing, and I've not gone through one whole night without having a nightmare about the events that took place that day. We joke about it occasionally, but we mainly keep our thoughts to ourselves. Since that first encounter, I've heard that howl many a time, and now I know what lies in the woods of Michigan, in Gulfstream County.
We hope you have all answered your Christmas seal letter and used those Christmas seals on all your gifts and greeting cards. This is the time to help stamp out TB. And this is the season for the Reynolds Metals Company to extend to you the very best of all good wishes. That best wish is peace on earth. Much of Reynolds' expanding aluminum production now goes to the defense of the nation, the defense of our free world. But the ultimate aim is peace, always. And the great destiny of light, strong, rust-proof Reynolds aluminum lies in peaceful progress. The Reynolds Metals Company looks forward to the day when all aluminum production can be turned to constructive uses. In a future when the inspired hope of Christmas shall be realized. And on earth, peace, goodwill toward men.
When I was younger, 16 or 17, I think, I had an encounter with something strange in the forest near Danbury, Wisconsin. A little background on me. I'm 6'4" and athletic. I'm a hunter, camper, and martial artist, generally a survivalist. I was naive and didn't give nature the proper level of respect and basically was a cocky teenager who felt invincible. Our cabin had been on Long Lake in Danbury, Wisconsin. The whole area is forested for the most part. I was there on vacation with my cousin and grandparents. It was a nice hot summer day, and we decided to play airsoft. I took airsoft really seriously. I wore a full BDU Woodland with a camouflage mask even. My cousin just wore a t-shirt. We had a battle which I took into the woods where I felt comfortable. We were about 150 meters into the forest when we stopped. I decided to tease my cousin. I shushed him and said we were being watched, jokingly. Unfortunately, it turned out to not be much of a joke, because I immediately then noticed that the woods were dead quiet, which only happens when a large predator is around. I was on edge very quickly. Next, the feeling of being watched hit so hard, so I started scanning the surrounding area. Then I saw it. The whitish teeth gave it away. What I saw was at the edge of a clearing about 40 meters from us, crouched and holding onto a tree with its left hand. It was panting and watching us with its ears up. It had reddish-brown hair or fur and looked canine. In my head, it clicked as a werewolf. I said to my cousin, "We have to go, and we have to go now," and he bolted. I still had my eyes on it when my cousin started sprinting. The creature charged. It ran on two legs for maybe 10 feet and then dropped to all fours. Then I turned and sprinted. What the goddamn hell is this thing? I could hear it crashing through the woods behind us as we ran out of the woods. Once I was back at the cabin, we discussed it. It's still unclear if my cousin even saw it. I told him I thought it was a bear to not freak him out. But I know bears, and it wasn't a bear. I started doing research on these things after my encounter, which brought me to many Dogman related websites. What I saw coincides with other people's sightings. I'm now far better about respecting nature, and I'm extremely cautious with the forests. If I go into nature alone, I'm always armed, but I prefer not to be alone. Always trust your senses.
The girl that got away. Okay, let's say it was 5 years to the day. She was the girl with the kind smile, that's just her way. Whatever else you, she'd be there with the word. But I never said how I feel, it's really absurd. The girl that got away, I don't want to talk about it. The girl that got away, I don't want to think about it. The girl that got away. When I think about the time I just said no, I set the kindness with a silence, I know it was cold. Then one day I realized she didn't show. I felt so certain, but deep inside
My story begins in the city of Atlanta. The date, October 1965. It was a Friday, and I had taken the day off work to drive down to Savannah to spend a long weekend with friends. There would be football games, music, and all of the barbecue and highballs that I could work in. I left home about 2 hours before dawn so as to be well out of town before any morning traffic started up. In what seemed like almost no time at all, I had gotten way down Interstate 75 below Macon. I could just see the faint indication of dawn approaching. I was making great time. There were lots of little towns and farms sprinkled here and there as I drove south, but mostly there were long stretches of nothing, with trees on both sides of the highway as far as I could see. It was in one of these areas, an isolated 30-mile run of highway, that I saw something that could not possibly exist. But I saw it with my own 2 eyes, and could swear to everyone within the sound of my voice that it does exist. 50 yards ahead, on the right edge of the highway, stood what I can only call a two-legged wolf. It had dark brown fur and ears like a German shepherd. It stood there next to a 3-foot highway marker, so I estimated it to be easily 7 feet tall. The creature walked out onto the highway and stopped in the middle. I hit the brakes, and when my car came to a complete stop, our eyes locked for a moment. It raised its snout into the air as if catching a scent, and then went into a full run across the highway into an endless ocean of pine trees. As it disappeared, I heard a series of terrifying howls echoing through the early morning air. Stunned, even shocked, I turned the music up on my radio and continued on my journey. I have never spoken of this encounter, and after this, I will never speak about it again. I have lived with the horror of those brief moments all these years, and the understanding that monsters are real. You're listening to the Dogman Terror Anthology on the Blackwater Media Radio Network. I'm in my 40s now. I've had 2 incidents in my life where I'm absolutely confident I saw a large, hairy, wolf or wolf-like creature. Once was in the 1970s, and I was rather young, maybe 7 or 8 at the most. The creature was looking at me in my bed on a night that was quite stormy before I saw it. I remember how big and broad it was, and how it stood on 2 legs as a human would. It was a dark night, but I could see this thing easily, as the departed storm was still close enough to flash lightning that lit up everything outside. The thing had a wolf face and yellowish eyes, but not bright yellow, not fluorescent-like either, more of a subdued yellow. It had pointy ears that seemed to keep moving through the whole experience, like he was twitching them all the time for some reason. It never snarled, growled, howled, etc., but it just looked at me. I was in bed, trying to settle down and go back to sleep after the storm, which rattled me as a kid. For some reason, I felt like I had to look outside. I turned over and sat up. I was not 20 feet from this thing, and separated only by the wrought iron door with its glass. I became terrified to the point I started to yell like mad. My grandmother and little sister were asleep in a bed even closer to the door, but at an angle they could not sit up and see what I saw. I was literally scared out of my wits. I started screaming, and quickly my grandmother woke up, turned on a lamp, then came over to me quickly, and of course she asked what was wrong. I was staring at the thing, and I could only point toward it. I could not speak a word. When I pointed, it started stepping back away from the door as my grandmother looked to see what scared me. She never said she saw it, but I am confident she did. Her voice changed, and she woke up immediately. My sister woke up about this time and stayed in the bed. She was younger than me, and she began crying because I was. She was scared because I was. I saw the thing turn and move away, not at a fast pace, just stepped away and faded into the dark. That's what happened. And I've lived every day with the terrible understanding that monsters are real. Do yourself a favor and choose not to believe that monsters are real. You'll sleep better at night. At least you will until, perchance, you're unfortunate enough to see what I've seen.
There's just one Schlitz, yeah, nothing else comes near. When you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer. If you like it light with a big taste too, there's only one brew that will do. When you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer. Real gusto in the great light beer Schlitz.
It was 1998. I was 37 years old. I had been working with the Forest Department for 12 years. There was a fire in the Apalachicola National Forest that summer. The Bradwell Bay area was on fire when all this happened. The fire was raging pretty bad at this point. We didn't know if we could ever get it out. That morning I'd reported to the command center on Helen Guard Station Road to get briefed on what I would be doing that day. So me and another guy were given the task of driving around looking for animals along the road of the Bradwell Bay area. Animals would make it to the road and usually fall out if they were injured or had real bad smoke inhalation. Our job was to pick them up and take them to the vets at the command center. The vets would treat them and on some occasions euthanize the ones that wouldn't make it. So we were driving around the area heading south, doing about 45 miles per hour, faster than I should have been driving. I was talking to my partner and didn't realize how fast I was going. All of a sudden we saw a black figure run out of the woods on all fours. It ran up under my driver's side tire. I hit the animal with both the front and back tires. I was driving a 95 Dodge Ram 4x4, so I knew at that speed I had killed it. Immediately we thought it was a bear. We got out to pick the bear up and put it on the truck. Upon further investigation, we realized what I had hit was not a bear at all. It was a creature that neither one of us had ever seen. It was about 6 feet tall. It had legs, kneecaps, and feet, just like a human. The arms hung to about the knee. One arm, a matter of fact, was down by its knee. The other one was up over its head. I had run the creature over under its right underarm, across the shoulder blade, and over the back of its neck. The creature was covered in hair, about 3 to 5 inches long on the arms, legs, and head. The hair on the back, ribs, and chest was much shorter. The muscle definition on the animal was phenomenal. It looked like a prize fighter or one of the guys you would see in the UFC. We flipped the animal over. The jaw was broken from where I had hit it with the truck. I could see, though, that it had a protruding snout, much like that of a baboon, or what you would think a werewolf looks like. It had eyes just like a human. The thing looked a lot like a chimpanzee. We quickly radioed into the command center, and they sent 2 FWC officials out to our location. Within about 15 minutes, the FWC officials arrived, and they told us that they'd never seen anything like it. So we all picked the animal up and loaded it into the back of their truck. The animal weighed about 300 to 400 pounds, which dead weight is a lot. They told us they would figure out what it was and let us know. So we had been contacted by the command center at this point, and they told us to come back and make a statement about what we saw. So we showed up at the command center, and immediately we were brought back to a room where we were to fill out an incident report. We were about 10 minutes into the incident report when we were asked to stop and wait, and that there were some people coming to see us. Within about 30 to 45 minutes, 2 government officials showed up. They walked us out to the vehicle. They were asking where we ran over the thing. We told them where it was, and so they examined the area. The truck had no damage. There was a black steel bumper on the front. The animal hit the bottom of that, and the tires took care of the rest. There was really nothing on the truck except for on the undercarriage. There was some blood and hair. The officials collected the blood and hair samples and put them away. Next, they asked us if we could get into the vehicle they came in and take them to the location where we had run over the animal. So we complied and got into the vehicle and left with the gentleman. It was a rather quiet ride back out to the spot. They didn't say much at all except for a couple of exchanges with each other. We showed up at that spot and walked them through what happened. Then all of a sudden, one of the guys, I guess the guy in charge, turned and looked at us and said, "Congratulations, fellas, you ran over a bear." I said, "Sir, but this is no bear that we hit." He quickly interrupted me with, "You don't understand. You ran over a bear." He then said that every time I tell anybody about this, to say that it was a bear. I was never to speak a word about what we actually hit. That I could face charges. My whole retirement could go away. They said I could lose my job and that they would slander me and make me look like a fool. So I looked at my partner and we had no other choice but to comply. On the ride back, it kind of struck me as odd that this was an actual government cover-up. They knew what this thing was that we had hit. They had seen them before, and now they were in possession of a body. For some reason, they didn't want anyone to know, and they were going to great lengths to keep this under wraps. The main reason I'm telling my story is I'm hoping one of the other three people, my partner and the two FWC officials, will come forward. I figure it's a lot harder to silence 4 people than it is just one. People need to know that these things are out there, and that they are real. You're listening to the Blackwater Media Radio Network, the finest in digital audio entertainment. This is Blackwater Media coming to you from the great city of Atlanta.
Trying not to say, what are you gonna do when I give my love to you?
few years ago, my dad and I were out on a hunting trip together in Minnesota, where we experienced something I'll never forget. Our dog, Hudson, was sleeping in the living room, and all of a sudden he started barking. I mean, barking like a motherfucker, like he was about to smash through the door and attack whatever was out there. My dad and I went out into the living room to calm him down, but he was standing at the door, hair standing up and barking like crazy. My dad repeatedly tried to calm him down, but to no avail. Hudson started pawing at the door, all the while continuing his bark. I looked out the window expecting to see a wolf or bear wandering around, but I couldn't see anything at all. There's a motion sensor on the front of the cabin to deter the raccoons in the middle of the night, and that wasn't even tripped. Eventually, Hudson calmed down, but he was still restless the rest of the night. I could hear Hudson walking around the cabin. It was almost as if he was standing guard over the whole place. We went out on our first day of hunting, but there wasn't anything worth firing a shot at. We went out on the porch for a cigarette, and my dad pointed out that the night was unusually quiet, and I pointed out that the day was too. Something off was going on around these woods. Hudson started barking again, even more ferocious than last night. We went back into the cabin and tried to hush him again, but he still wouldn't listen. Again, I peered out of the window, and again I found nothing, except for this time, the motion sensor was on. It wasn't on 2 minutes before. When we were out there, I began to make out movement just outside the light and strained my eyes to see past the light. I finally got my dad to look outside, and his entire demeanor changed. He wasn't so laid back anymore. He was stiffened and agitated. "That's not a goddamn bear. What the hell is it?" I went over to the gun rack and grabbed my Weatherby Vanguard rifle. My dad was instantly in front of me. "You shoot at that thing and we're going to have one hell of a problem. Just let it do its thing and wander off like it did last night." I went to the window again and looked outside. The motion sensors were off, but I could just make out movement. It was still there. Hudson quieted down and started pacing around again. I told my dad I think it left, and he looked like he was relieved. He went to the kitchen, grabbed 2 shot glasses, and poured us both some Jack Daniels, our favorite. He said he caught a glimpse of it, and it looked like a wolf, but it was too big and bulky. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I woke up to another round of Hudson's incessant barking. He was pawing at my door and barking like crazy. I glanced over at the window to the right of the bed and damn near fell out of the bed. Whatever Hudson was barking at was peering in the window. "This is no wolf. This goddamn thing is gigantic." It stared right back at me. It was furry and black, had yellow eyes, and they looked like they were glowing. Ears that were triangular and sitting on top of its head. Long canine teeth with a long wolf-like muzzle. It looked to me like it was hunched over or crouching down so it could look in the window. Then this son of a bitch licked the screen on the window. I leaped out of the bed and bolted out of the room. My dad was already awake, and I started yelling at him that the thing was back outside. I grabbed my rifle again, not caring about my dad's warning, but it was already gone. My dad was right behind me and told me not to shoot, that it would just piss it off. He told me he thought it was a werewolf. I saw it with my own eyes, and it really did look like a werewolf, like from the Underworld movies. He told me that when he saw it, it was standing on 2 legs and had to be at least 8 feet tall. I moved out of the bedroom into the living room again and looked out of the window. The sensor was tripped again, but I couldn't see the thing anywhere. Eventually, Hudson calmed down again and all was quiet. I continued to stare out of the window, watching for any sign of the creature's return. For the rest of the night, neither of us slept. We just waited. Every time Hudson got up, my body twitched, waiting for him to start barking again, but he never did. The sun rose and we walked around the cabin but found nothing. We trekked out into the woods but didn't go too far into it. There were no signs that a werewolf, monster, thing, whatever the hell it was, had been there the night before. I thought to myself, Maybe Hudson could pick up the trail, and when I said it out loud, my dad said, "You sound like a fool." It dawned on me that I didn't actually want to find proof that this thing was out there, and I definitely didn't want to find the thing itself. My dad said we should probably just go back into the cabin and pack up. I didn't have a problem with that.